Hello, everybody. Welcome tonight to our broadcast. We have a very special speaker, Ashley. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, Julie. Hi, everyone.
And we are both joining you from California tonight. Very exciting. So I'm in Los Angeles. Ashley, where are you?
I'm in Oceanside, California, so just north of San Diego.
Not such a shabby place. That sounds very nice. Oceanside. I love it. So as you guys join us tonight, please share where you are tuning in from. It's really fun to see where people are watching from. And as Ashley's sharing her story tonight, please put in comments of what's resonating with you. Ashley can answer some questions after she's done. So go ahead and put your questions into the Facebook comments. Just also remember that anything that you comment on the video will stay with the video and it's public. So you don't want to share anything there that you don't want to share publicly. And please just remember that we do these story sharing sessions because everyone's story is so different and so important, but also we're doing it for education and awareness. And if anything about Ashley's story tonight gives you a question about your own medical situation, please bring those questions to a sleep specialist. Let's see, what else? Well, as far as Project Sleep updates, we just had our big sleep advocacy forum this past week. It's a leadership meeting to bring together leaders of different sleep-related nonprofits with members of Congress and NIH representatives. So it was a really wonderful forum. And we will have the videos from that available soon. If you weren't able to join us, we'll get those videos out so you can check out the different presentations. And besides that, I think that's about it right now. We're really excited to have Ashley present as, I believe, one of the first speakers. We're just getting going from the graduates from last summer from the Rising Voices. So let's see. Okay, well, Ashley, I'm going to go ahead and read your bio and then I'll pull up your slides for you to start. Okay.
Sure. Sounds
All
good.
right. So Ashley Blankenship. Gosh, Blankenship is an account manager, dog mom, and an outdoor enthusiast from Carlsbad, California. She was diagnosed with type 1 narcolepsy with cataplexy at age 29 after struggling with symptoms for nearly a decade. As a Rising Voices of Narcolepsy speaker, she strives to eliminate stigma and misinformation around this neurological condition through storytelling and meaningful education. So it is my huge honor to introduce you guys to Ashley and have her share her story tonight. Let's see, pull these up. And Ashley, take it away.
All right. So thank you so much, Julie, for this invitation. I'm so excited to share my story with everyone today. And I'm also happy to answer any questions at the end as well. So next slide, please. All right, so growing up, I truly was a lover of the outdoors. As you can see from the photo here, even from a young age, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather exploring the farm and going to the pond to feed the ducks. I also really enjoyed exploring the woods behind my house as I got a little bit older, and I would bring home all sorts of things like frogs and lizards, much to my mother's dismay. And although I was pretty outdoorsy and adventurous, I also had a perfectionistic streak. So I worried a lot about doing well in school and just being a good kid in general. And one of my parents' favorite stories to tell about that was the story of when they decided to replace their living room furniture. So I had this one chair in the living room, and it was known as the timeout chair, where I would go when I'd been disobedient. And so when they started to have the movers come in to move out the old furniture and bring in the new furniture, I started to cry. And they were like, Ashley, why are you crying? What's wrong? And I said, where am I going to sit for timeout if the timeout chair is gone? And like, what kid is upset to see the timeout chair go, right? That just goes to show how worried I was about following the rules. Next slide, please. All right, so I've always had what I would describe as a complicated relationship with sleep. So I struggled to fall asleep, kind of struggled to stay asleep, and had vivid dreams and nightmares throughout my life. But I wouldn't say that any of it really started to impact me until I was about college age. And there's one instance in particular that I'll never forget. It happened when I was around 20 years old, and I was asleep in my apartment when I suddenly awoke to screaming. It was screams for help, and it sounded like it was coming from right next door. So I sat up in bed. I was completely terrified. I decided to call the police. So the police came. They knocked on all the doors of my neighbors, woke everybody up, asked them all if they'd heard anything. And they came back and reported to me that none of my neighbors had heard a thing. They'd all been asleep. Nobody had woken up. And I thought that was just impossible because I knew what I'd heard and I couldn't imagine somebody else sleeping through that. And that really bothered me for a long time afterwards because I felt like I'd really heard something and I didn't know what had happened. So as I'm in college, this is around my sophomore, junior year, my sleep issues really started to impact my schoolwork and my classwork. And I felt like, every time I would go to my class, the lessons that I learned would just kind of evaporate out of my brain overnight. And I felt like I couldn't stay up late to study like my peers. And I just kind of chalked it up to being, a tired college student, although I wasn't really doing any of the things that college students stereotypically do that make them tired. I wasn't staying out late and partying. I was trying to get plenty of rest, but I just couldn't shake it. So nevertheless, I persevered and eventually I graduated with a degree in chemistry. And I got my first job in Charlotte, North Carolina as a chemist. So around this time, I was going to sleep, getting ready to get up for work the next day. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw a man in my doorway. And I knew immediately that somebody must have broken into my house. I was terrified and I couldn't see what he looked like. It was very dark and all I could see was just sort of a shadow. But he started to move towards my bed and I was like, oh man, it's time to run. I have to get out of here. So I tried, but my limbs were frozen and I couldn't move. So then I tried to scream, but I couldn't do that either. I was just completely paralyzed. So as the man got closer and closer to my bed, I kind of jolted more awake. And at that point, the man disappeared. And I realized it had to have been some kind of crazy dream, but I didn't really know what kind or why that had happened. And it left me feeling really scared and unnerved. And unfortunately, that was the first time of many that I would awake to see this man or other scary things in my room at night and be unable to move. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm about 25 and I'm getting ready to marry my husband. I've been with him since I was about a freshman in college. He's awesome. He's also very silly and likes to joke around. And one of his favorite things to do is to try and tickle me. So I'm not a very ticklish person, so he takes it as like his own personal challenge to try and tickle me. And so one day, he came up and he hit me in like just the right spot in my ribs where I was super ticklish. And I felt myself start to sink. And I called out to him. I was like, stop, stop, I'm falling. And he kind of like, let go. And he's like, okay, whatever, whatever. And at that point, I thought that was normal. Like I felt like maybe most people just sort of lost the ability to stand upright when they were tickled. But I would learn later that that is not quite so normal. So things are going great. For me personally, I've married, I've had my job, and then I got a couple of promotions as well. So my career was like just on the move and I was doing great there, but health-wise, I was not doing so well. My symptoms and my issues with sleep were getting worse and worse, and I was struggling a lot more frequently with brain fog and feeling kind of like dizzy and disoriented at work. And there was one particular day I remember my brain fog was just so intense. I was trying to write emails and I couldn't even think of like the right words to put into the email. And when I was trying to read responses, I just couldn't even comprehend what they were saying. I would read and reread and reread them. And I felt so disoriented and just so bad. And I remember walking outside on my lunch break and I called my husband and I was crying. I was like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I'm having so many more bad days than good days lately. And I just don't know what's wrong. And I went over to my car and I knew at this point, I couldn't really drive anywhere, but I got in the back seat and I curled up, in my tiny car seat. And I was just laying there, like trying to will my mind to clear up. And I remember feeling really worried and nervous that I was laying down in my car. I thought, somebody might see me, they might think it's weird, I might get in trouble. But I laid there and I rested, and I don't think I slept very long. But after I got up, I felt significantly better, and I was able to go back and return to the rest of my workday. So next slide, please. All right, so at this point, I'm realizing, something's wrong, something's not so normal. And I talked to my doctors before about, my issues with sleep, and they'd all kind of brushed it off as stress, anxiety, whatever. And at this point, I went back and it was kind of the same old thing. They did blood work, everything was fine. And this particular doctor basically told me, maybe you should just drink more wine at night to help you sleep. And she also told me to stop scrolling so much on my phone, that would help with my brain fog and my disorientation that I was feeling. Uh, and I remember just feeling so invalidated and like I just hadn't been listened to at all. And I knew there was something going on, and it wasn't something that more wine or less scrolling on my phone was going to fix. So I knew that at that point, I needed to go and try and find a doctor that would listen to me. So that's what I did. I found a new primary care physician, and he listened really well to me. He totally took all my concerns seriously and eventually sent me to a neurologist who was the first person to bring up the idea of narcolepsy to me. And when I heard narcolepsy, I was, kind of surprised. I personally thought that narcolepsy was very like comical and dramatic, like what you see in the movies. And I thought that because I wasn't, dramatically falling asleep in the middle of talking or walking or eating, that's not something that could possibly apply to me. But he wanted me to go to a sleep study, and I was pretty skeptical at first, but I decided to go just to rule it out, So I went, and I remember feeling like I hadn't really slept too much. I had my same old sleep issues in the sleep study. And I remember being really frustrated and thinking, they're not even going to be able to use this data. Like, this was a complete waste of my time. But sure enough, when I went back for my consultation and review of the sleep study results, the doctor said that he was diagnosing me with narcolepsy, and I was just totally shocked. I couldn't believe it because, I had all those misconceptions, and I didn't really know what narcolepsy was. So I did what any good scientist would do, and I went home and I did some research, and I learned that, next slide, please. Thank you. Narcolepsy is a chronic neurological disorder that impairs the brain's ability to regulate the sleep-wake cycle. It affects 1 in 2,000 people, 200,000 Americans, and 3 million people worldwide. So next slide, please. Symptoms of narcolepsy vary by person and may include excessive daytime sleepiness. So this is periods of extreme sleepiness during the day that feel comparable to how someone without narcolepsy would feel after staying awake for 48 to 72 hours. So that day that I had to go and lay down in my car in the work parking lot, that was an example of daytime sleepiness. There's also cataplexy, which is striking sudden episodes of muscle weakness, usually triggered by strong emotions such as laughter, exhilaration, surprise, or anger. And the severity may vary from a slackening of the jaw or buckling of the knees to falling down. The duration may be for a few seconds to several minutes, and the person remains fully conscious, even if unable to speak during the episode. So my feeling of weakness when being tickled, that was cataplexy. My cataplexy is extremely mild and doesn't actually impact my quality of life too much, but it can be a very severe symptom for others. Another symptom is hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. These are visual, auditory, or tactile hallucinations upon falling asleep or waking up. These can be frightening and confusing. And then there's sleep paralysis, which is the inability to move for a few seconds or minutes upon falling asleep or waking up. It is often accompanied by hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations. It's important to know that people without narcolepsy can experience these hallucinations and sleep paralysis. In fact, about 1/3 of all people experience these at some point in their lives, usually during periods of high stress or poor sleep. For people with narcolepsy, these are much more frequent and consistent over time. So when I heard my neighbor screaming, this was a hypnopompic hallucination. And when I saw the man in the doorway and I couldn't move, this was sleep paralysis. So there's also disrupted nighttime sleep. Unlike public perceptions, people with narcolepsy do not sleep all the time. Timing of sleepiness is off with narcolepsy, so one may fight sleepiness during the day, but struggle to sleep at night. There are two forms of narcolepsy, narcolepsy with cataplexy and narcolepsy without cataplexy. Recent research suggests that narcolepsy with cataplexy is caused by a lack of hypocretin, a key neurotransmitter that helps sustain alertness and regulate the sleep-wake cycle. Less is known about narcolepsy without cataplexy. So my diagnosis is narcolepsy with cataplexy. Next slide, please. All right, so diagnosis typically includes a 24-hour sleep study that includes a nighttime portion known as polysomnography and a daytime nap portion, the multiple sleep latency test, to record one's brain waves. The diagnosis is mainly based on how quickly and frequently one goes into rapid eye movement or dream sleep stage during these tests. So here's a picture of me at my sleep study. And I remember thinking that I felt like I was in some sort of sci-fi movie with all of those electrodes attached all over my body. It was really interesting. Next slide, please. So unfortunately, there's currently no cure for narcolepsy. Treatment is for symptom management and it varies widely by person, but it can include wake promoting, histamine directed, or stimulant medications to increase alertness in the daytime, nighttime medications to increase wakefulness and reduce cataplexy, antidepressant medication to decrease occurrence of cataplexy, and scheduled daytime naps. And then coping strategies vary widely by person, but may include social support, such as meetup groups or social media, improvement in general health and wellness through sleep, hygiene, diet, and fitness. So what's been most helpful for me are nighttime medications, scheduled naps, and then social media support. I think it's been really important for my mental health to connect with others who also share my same condition. And I found a lot of support and resources through social media. Next slide, please. All right, so life with narcolepsy. One of the biggest adjustments that I had to make was to my attitude and my expectations. So I was a go hard, super busy perfectionist beforehand. I didn't really ever give myself a break, and I was really hard on myself all the time. With narcolepsy, I've had to learn, that I do have boundaries, and I've had to learn to give myself grace around those boundaries, and when I should say no to things and prioritize rest. And it's actually really been healthy for me and has benefited my mental health a lot. I found that I have a much healthier relationship with myself and a better outlook on life since I've put those boundaries in place. And so that's been actually one positive outcome for me of my diagnosis. Responses from people in my life are generally pretty positive. I have a wonderful husband. He's been with me through the entire thing from, before I ever had symptoms all the way through diagnosis and the difficulty of finding the right treatments. He's been just constantly supportive and encouraging, and he's really been my rock. I'm super grateful for him. As far as other people in my life go, when I tell people about my narcolepsy, they usually either don't really know what it is, or they have some of the same misconceptions that I had originally as well. I had one friend who I told her about it, and she said, oh, my husband works crazy shifts, so he has to take naps sometimes. So that's basically the same thing. And in those instances, I just have to use it as an option or an opportunity to educate people, to let them know more about narcolepsy and to encourage them to ask questions. One way that I like to describe narcolepsy to people who don't know what it's like is permanent jet lag. And with my job prior to COVID, I used to travel a lot, which would include some trips to Asia. And on one such trip, one of my coworkers was talking about jet lag and saying that, when he has jet lag, it makes him sleepy all day and he can't sleep well at night. And he just feels very like fuzzy headed, has a lot of brain fog. And I was thinking, wow, that's like what narcolepsy feels like every day, really. And so I found that it's a really useful analogy for people who don't have narcolepsy to understand what it is like, because most people can relate to the feeling of jet lag. Next slide, please. All right, so I have a few passions. One of the big ones is that I am on a steering committee for an employee resource group at my company for people with disabilities. It's a newly formed employee resource group. We just started it earlier this year, and we had our first big kickoff event back over the summer. And I'm just so passionate about this group because it's a space for employees to come and, talk, and really gives them the opportunity to bring the most authentic version of themselves to the workplace and to feel like they're being heard and people are there to support them. So that's been really exciting and has been a great, one of my favorite parts of this past year. I also enjoy hiking and backpacking. My husband and I started doing that several years ago, and we've taken many different trips to various national parks across the US and Canada. The picture that you see here is from our backpacking trip to Yosemite last year. It was one of our tougher ones to date. We hiked over 30 miles and we did over 5,000 feet of elevation gain across 4 days. So it was a great trip. I love backpacking because it's a great opportunity for me to get out and connect with nature and to kind of live in the moment. And it definitely creates space from, my normal work life, and it's just so relaxing for me. I don't take my medication when I'm backpacking for various reasons, but I'm in good company because nobody sleeps very well in a sleeping bag in a tent in the wilderness. So I definitely make use of caffeine during these backpacking trips, and it's a good time. Okay, next slide, please. So unfortunately, because of low awareness, even amongst physicians and misperceptions, there is an average of 8 to 15 years between narcolepsy symptom onset and diagnosis. It's estimated that the majority of people with narcolepsy are currently undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. So common misdiagnoses include epilepsy, depression, and schizophrenia. It took me over a decade to get diagnosed. So by sharing my story, I really want to increase awareness, leading to more rapid diagnosis. And I hope to eliminate the stigma and misinformation that is so often presented in the media. And I want people to understand what narcolepsy is and how it affects those who have it. And for those who have narcolepsy or other chronic health conditions and struggle with feelings of inadequacy or self-criticism, I want you to know that you are not alone and that we are on this journey of finding balance and compassion for ourselves together. Next slide, please. I'm sharing my story today as part of the Rising Voices of Narcolepsy, a program of the nonprofit organization Project Sleep, which empowers patient advocates to share their stories and improve public understanding of narcolepsy. Thank you so much for listening to my story.
Yay! Let's see. Stop the share. Yay, Ashley! Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing today. And actually, because I had your slides up on my computer here, I feel like I didn't end up getting into the Facebook Live to check out what was happening there. So I'm going to get that going, but I'm going to ask, so folks, please send in your questions to Ashley if you have questions. And but I'm going to start with one of my own questions. So you mentioned about social media that was really helpful for you. And I think, that probably resonates with a lot of people. So can you just share a little bit more or an example of how social media has been helpful?
Yeah, for sure. So I think initially when I was diagnosed, I felt really alone because I didn't know anybody else that had narcolepsy. And, as we talked about, it's not super common. And even when I was researching it online, there was just, not a ton out there. So once I realized that there were resources on Instagram and Facebook, and I started realizing that there are people out there that were sharing their stories and talking about their experiences, that made me feel so much less alone. And I was able to utilize those resources and relate to those experiences and really feel like, I was being understood, right? And I had people that I could go to and talk about it, and they would completely understand where I was coming from, no questions asked.
So I feel like there was something recently, I don't remember what it was, but you shared, um, I didn't ask you this in advance, but I think you had a recent trip where it was a little bit challenging to keep up with some.
Yeah, I went on a hike with some coworkers, and I didn't realize beforehand that these particular coworkers, one of them's like an ultra marathoner that does like, 100-mile runs, and the other one is a very experienced hiker. And I do hiking and backpacking, but not to such an extreme extent. So I got on this hike, and I was like really struggling to keep up. And, so it's definitely an exercise in willpower, and also kind of asking them like, hey guys, can you slow down and wait for me a couple of times. But it was really rewarding, and it definitely like pushed me out of my comfort zone. So that was fun too.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's pretty amazing that you're doing so much. And I think I asked you this when you presented before. Do you ever feel like you need to take a nap when you're on the hikes or anything, or you feel it okay when you're getting through it and just kind of crash at the end?
Yeah, I usually think like the physical activity and the act of being up and walking usually keeps me pretty awake. I have not to date had to take a nap, but there have definitely been times where I came close, so we'll see what the future holds there. Usually I can make it until I get to my campsite at the end of the day, with the use of some caffeine.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't know that I know the answer to this of how you found Project Sleep in the Rising Voices program.
Yeah, so I think Project Sleep was one of the first social media accounts that I followed, like when I started finding social media accounts on Instagram and stuff. Um, and it just, I love what you have. I love your organization that you've created. I think that it's so cool, and I haven't seen anything else like it. So it was something that I got really excited about, because I was like, oh man, like I didn't even know there were organizations out here like this for narcolepsy. And so then, just following the account, seeing what you guys were doing every year, I saw the information about Rising Voices, and I thought like, wow, that would be such a cool opportunity. And it took me a while to get up the courage to actually try to do it, because at first I was a little bit scared, to share my story and to put it out there. But eventually, just seeing everybody else who is an advocate and how awesome they are, and how much it had helped me, I felt like it was something that I really wanted to do. So thank
Yeah.
you for that and for being there.
Yeah. We're so glad that you worked up the courage. Well, we have a question here from Irene. Hey, Irene. Irene wants to know, what is a key takeaway? Oops, let's see, it just moved a little bit. What is a key takeaway that you would like people without narcolepsy to understand?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think for people without narcolepsy, one of the best things that they can do is just be listening and understanding. When I tell people about narcolepsy, there are misperceptions, and I think that, the more questions they ask and the more of an opportunity that they have to get education or educate themselves, I think that's great. Um, so yeah, I think just like listening and understanding and asking questions, rather than kind of like jumping to, oh, I know what this is, I've seen this in movies, that kind of thing.
Yeah. We have another question from Stephanie. Stephanie says that as a fellow person with narcolepsy, she finds handling what she calls her drops the hardest things to do. The times when all of a sudden you just get tired and feel like you can't stay awake. What do you do to help when you are at work? Have you found something that works better than others?
Mm. Um, I think first of all, being on the medication that I'm on has improved that pretty dramatically. So I don't have as severe of, the drops as I used to. Also, I will say that I'm really lucky that I have the opportunity to work from home a lot. So if I do get to that point, I can usually find some time to go and take a quick nap. And usually a quick nap is the best solution for me, honestly. Tried caffeine and other things, but usually it's just best to go take a nap and not fight it.
Yeah.
That's how that's been most helpful for me, at least. Yeah.
Ashley and I, as soon as we were on this broadcast together, before we went live, we both were saying we both just got our nap in.
Yeah.
Right before the broadcast. So that's probably, yeah, the same for me. Take the nap before the nap takes you, right?
Yeah.
Some days I'm better at that than other days, but and I think what you said resonated with me as well during your presentation about how you ended up in your car. And in Southern California, I mean, in a lot of different places that's unsafe for different reasons, but in Southern California it can be quite hot, to be, in your car for a long time. So let's see. I don't see other questions right now in the broadcast. Guys, please send in more questions there. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about, I think you said it was the employee resource group for people with disabilities at work. Do you know how it got started? And I guess I'm not sure how many workplaces have a group like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we did actually, so we're working with this organization. It's a diversity organization, and literally all they do is just help corporations with their diversity programs and help connect them with other corporations that have diversity and specifically disability programs. So it's called Disability In. And so our organization started just because we had some employees that had gotten together and been like, hey, I think our organization needs this and these other organizations have it. So can we build this? And they talked to our diversity group at my company and they said, yeah, we should add that. So that started, and then they had a call out for members to be on the steering committee. So I joined at that time. But it's been kind of an interesting evolution. I think it's really great because, like you said, not all companies have, I mean, first of all, diversity organizations, but then to go as far as like including things like people with disabilities and, other such types of diversity. So it's really was kind of a grassroots movement. It wasn't necessarily like a corporate mandate. It was just a bunch of employees saying, hey, we need this. Can we get it? So yeah.
And with the pandemic, it's just online or in person or?
Yeah, we just we meet online and we are doing sometimes we'll have presentations that we do and it's all done online through like Zoom or Blue Jeans or whatever.
That is so cool. And have you given your Rising Voices presentation to the group?
No, but I am hoping to give it for Sleep Week this year. So I'm very excited.
Cool. That's cool. And then I think you mentioned to us as well that you might have another presentation that you've been working on getting.
Yeah, I have a local EMT school. It's actually just down the street from me. And so I talked to them and they are hoping to get me in sometime in the first quarter of next year to give my presentation.
Oh, that would be so great for EMTs to be more educated about narcolepsy.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, good. We can't wait to hear how that goes.
Yep.
I'm not seeing any other questions on the Facebook, but if you guys have any more questions for Ashley, go ahead and put them in. I'm just going to ask one more personal question. I've seen that you've been doing a lot of home renovation and adding a lot of plants. First of all, your home renovation looks, I'm doing a little home renovation, I've been calling it, but not quite as big as yours, I think. So how do you have the energy to be doing these major home renovations? And tell me about what you're doing.
Well, so the energy part, I hired most of it out. So that's how I had the energy for that. I have done a lot of painting, which is not quite as strenuous. I just put in, a good podcast and I go for it. And it's actually pretty therapeutic, I feel like. But yeah, aside from the painting, I totally didn't do much of it.
Okay.
But yeah, it has been a really fun and long project. So we're excited that it's pretty much over now. And I did recently start to enjoy plants. So I have previously been a plant killer in my past life. And I'm trying to turn over a new leaf, so to speak. So I started with succulents, which I discovered when I moved out here to California, and they are very easy to keep alive. You basically ignore them until they need water, and then you give them some, and they're good. So that's gone really well. And so I recently graduated to some other sorts of plant life, and we've been going for a few weeks with those, and they seem okay. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and hopefully they'll work out.
Yeah, I'm about on the same page as far as plants go. So yeah, I'm trying just not to kill things. And I have, a few die, but for the most part, I have a pretty good, I think 75% of my plants are alive. So I think
Yeah.
that's good.
Awesome.
Oh, so that's just such a nice comment. Thank you, Irene. Irene says it's great seeing PWN pushing forward and educating others. Thank you. And I agree. So I don't see other questions on here, so maybe we will go ahead and end here with a big thank you to Ashley for sharing your story and for educating others. It's good to see how far you've come from, that night where you thought someone was being murdered yeah.
Right.
In the building to where you are now. And just so glad that you're part of our community. And thank you everyone for tuning in to hear Ashley's story. Please share this video if you can to your page. The more people that share it, the more we can educate other people through stories. So let's see, we do have one more. Carrie wants to know, since being able to spread awareness on your behalf, how's your headspace been?
Oh, I think my headspace has been pretty good. I think that it's been a really positive experience for me to be able to spread awareness and to be more of a part of a community. It definitely makes me feel like, I have people that I can count on and be there for me, and then I can be there in return. And so it's been really positive for my mental health.
Definitely. Thank you guys again for all your great questions and comments. I'm sure Ashley will enjoy checking them out afterwards as well. So with that, I think we'll say goodnight. We will be back in a few weeks. I believe probably about 2 weeks with another person's story, because everyone's story is so important and different. And some of the ways you describe stuff tonight resonate with me a lot. And that's why we love hearing so many different stories. So thank you again, Ashley. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a good
Thank
rest of the night.
you. Bye.
All right, bye.